At this time, I invite you to join in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Sumter School District August 23rd, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting. This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. This meeting is open to the public, but with limited first come, first served seating due to COVID-19. All persons wishing to attend the meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board meetings and Sumter School District's Facebook page. The mission of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. The vision of Sumter School District is it develops and cultivates competitive students who embrace diversity and act responsibly and contribute to society. Your board members are yours truly, Dr. Barbara Jackson, Chairwoman, representing Area 7, Dr. J. Frank Baker, C8, Vice Chair, Dr. Darrell McGaney, Clerk, Area 5, Mrs. Cheryl Ray, who is representing Area 2, Mr. Brian Alston, Area 1, Mr. Mac McLeod, Area 3, Dr. Johnny B. Hilton, Area 4, Dr. Gloria Lee, Area 6, Mr. Sean Reagan, Area 9, Mrs. Robin Mills, Deputy Director of Installation Support, Shaw Air Force Base Representative, Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, our Superintendent, Mrs. Amy Hanson, our Administrative Assistant, Ms. Connie Jackson, our Attorney, and she's with Halligan, Mahoney, and Williams, and Alan Smith is joining us by Zoom as well. This meeting is now called to order. And good evening, and thanks to those of you that are here in person and virtual for joining us this evening. As you are aware, our students have returned, and they returned on August 17th for the school year. We encourage your support, and we strongly recommend that our students and staff continue to practice, including wearing masks, safety at all times. With no objection, the agenda will stand approved.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
for the agenda item 4.4, discussion of masks in schools, can that be amended to read discussion of safety protocols in schools?
Okay. All right.
I guess it would need to be 4.4 as well as item 8.6 of safety protocols in schools as well, under action required.
Okay. This would be, and is this due to, why are we doing this? Is this because
To be more inclusive of the discussion item.
and the emergency nature of COVID-19?
Yes, ma'am.
there any objections to Mr. Alston's request?
Just need him to read amended agenda 4.4 and 8.6 by adding safety protocols to read discussion of masks in schools and other safety protocols. It's going to show up on the screen in just a minute. If someone wants to second that.
Second.
Okay. Okay, then, we have received a motion and a second to amend agenda to 4.4 and 8.6 by adding safety protocol to read discussion of masks in schools and other safety protocols. It has been seconded. Are there any objections?
You just need to say that that's because of the emergency nature of COVID.
Okay. Adding to that, the emergency nature of COVID-19. Are there any objections to the motion? You now have the approval request in front of you. Please vote.
It passed.
Okay, the motion passes to amend the agenda as stated earlier. Okay. We're now down to the board recognition, and we're asking Dr. Martin Knox if she would have at this time, if she has some special staff recognition, to please do so.
I do. Good evening, Chairwoman Jackson, Vice Chairman Baker, members of the Sumter School District Board, and members of the Sumter School District community. This evening, it was my intent to have our school nurses participate in a virtual capacity in this evening's meeting. But because we have Nurse Divine here joining us, I just want to take the opportunity just to commend our school nurses for their hard work and dedication each and every day. Many of our nurses are working till 9 and 10 o'clock at night, and even working on Saturdays and Sundays to fulfill their responsibilities, and then the additional responsibilities that they've incurred as a result of the pandemic as it continues to plague us. So I would be remiss if I did not thank our nurses for their hard work, and Michelle for your leadership. We truly appreciate all the work that you've done and are doing, and I did not want the day to go by without saying thank you. Thank you to you and your nurses. And what we will also do is to share with them a certificate of appreciation so they can post on the wall, and while they're working, know that we appreciate you and them for their work. So thank you, Ms. Devine. So as our nurses are working as well, I just want to thank our staff for the hard work that they're demonstrating at this particular point in time, as we continue to provide an environment where our children can come with minimal disruptions. So whether it's our facilities, our building service, transportation, food services, technology, our teachers, our support staff, our administrators, everyone, we're coming together to make sure that we can do the best we can to do what's right by our children. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to recognize the Sumter School District staff. When we come together, good things happen. And so I just wanted to publicly recognize our team for the work that they have done and are continuing to do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Martin Knox, and thanks to Mrs. Devine as well. Okay, we're now down to board communication. Trustees, I invite you to share any announcements that you may have at this time.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I have the privilege of visiting Pacala Springs and Willow Drive, and I believe I went to Lakewood at the start of the school year, and I want to say shout out to all the principals over there.
Thank you. Great, great. Any other announcements?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would just like to recognize the Sumter High and Lakewood football team, had the opportunity Saturday night to go out and support our student athletes and our band, and our cheerleaders and all the staff and their hard work. So it's great to have football back in Sumter School District.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Austin. Any other announcements? Okay, hearing none, we will now move to 4.2, our committee reports. We will now hear reports from the committee chairs, and I will begin with the Citizens Advisory Committee. The subcommittees have begun to meet, and I do look forward to the information that will be shared when the full Citizen Advisory Committee comes back together in October. Thank you for that. Thank you, committee chairs, for beginning the great works for this committee. We're now down to Facilities Committee, Mr. Reagan.
We don't have a report tonight, however, we are scheduled for a meeting this Wednesday here at the district office at 6 o'clock p.m.
Okay, that's August
25th.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reagan. Our Finance Committee recommendation, Mrs. Ray.
No recommendations, but we do have a meeting on August the 30th, next Monday at 6 o'clock here at the district office.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ray. Mr. Alston.
Yes, ma'am. The Policy Committee has before us second reading for policy ADA amendments is listed on the agenda under action required for this evening. The Policy Subcommittee will meet on Thursday, August 26th at 6 p.m. here at the district office as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alston. We're now down to the Transportation Study Ad Hoc Committee recommendations. Our report, Dr. Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to stress to everyone that if you have an opportunity to please continue to help in our efforts to share the link, www.sumterrealignment.com with our community. No options have been developed yet or shared, and Mr. Crawford will present the project process, criteria, timeline, and realignment objectives to the community. Preparations are being made for the public information session, which is scheduled for September the 14th at 6 p.m. And this session will be virtual, and the public will be invited certainly to participate in this session. Also, there is a tab for general feedback. However, questions may also be submitted to mproper@gis.com or amy.hanson@sumterschools.net, or by calling 803-469-6900 extension 102. Also, keep in mind that no realignment options will be shared at the first public information session. Draft options again, will be presented at the second ad hoc meeting scheduled for September the 30th, and the board will be given an orientation on the options at their September the 27th meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Baker. We're now down to 4.3, our legislative update. Dr. Hilton.
No report at this time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hilton. We're 4.4, the discussion of masks in schools. This item was a trustee request for discussion and action. And at this time, I would ask Mr. Alston to start the discussion.
Yes,
We will
ma'am.
also include safety protocols.
And yes, the safety protocols will also be included in that.
Yes, ma'am. I requested this item to be placed on the agenda. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, and we receive updates throughout the day of our numbers in the district that are unsettling. We have students, we have staff that's being impacted, and outside of students and staff being impacted, we have communities that are being impacted. We have a hospital system that's becoming filled with COVID patients, and I think we as a body need to address this and address the transmission within our schools. Now you towards other the trustees.
Okay, do we have any other board members that want to add to that at this time? Okay, Dr. Hilton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm concerned as well. You may recall at our last meeting, I made a motion that we mandate masks in our elementary schools. The motion was not seconded. I'm very concerned about the number of kids that are being reported as positive in our schools. I'm very concerned about the number of kids that are being quarantined. I'm very concerned that there seems to be some confusion on the part of parents related to these protocols, the protocol in the school regarding how is it decided, who gets quarantined. There doesn't seem to be clear information out there, at least this is what I'm hearing from parents. Doesn't seem to be clear information out there. What are the rules? If I'm sitting by the door and I test positive, does that mean the whole class gets quarantined? If I have a mask and I tested positive, does that mean the whole class gets quarantined? If I didn't have on a mask, what are the rules regarding these safety protocols and the responses to when a teacher and or a student is identified as being positive? Who gets quarantined? How long do they get quarantined? Or, and I know this sounds a little bizarre, but if somebody calls the school and says, I tested positive, are we requiring verification of that positive report? And it sounds bizarre because somebody could report a positive and not be positive just because they don't want to come to school. Or, you know, there are a lot of folks out there that have some strange ideas about what to do, what's right, what's wrong. So are we verifying positive cases? Are we verifying when the kid tests negative after having been positive? There just seems to be a lot of questions floating around the community about what are the protocols, what are the rules, personally, I think that our children would be safer if everybody in the schools wearing a mask. So I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hilton. Yes, Mr. Reagan?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just want to join in the discussion tonight because as I know it's probably dear and near to everyone's heart that's sitting around this table tonight. However, I too feel the same way. And I just need to speak on it. With the number of cases that we had that were considered positive within our district, the number of messages, the number of ways that we've been contacted as a board, notifying us what's going on in this district, I believe that the people around this table tonight need to really consider the health and the safety of those that are inside of the schools. And not that we were not, but at this time the pandemic is still going on. And so I do stand with them. I stand with those who would like to have a mask mandate within our schools. Whether we look at it to be temporary, we can go back and review it as a board, we can put it in policy. However, we need to consider that. People are still dying. Cases are still rising. So we need to take a stand tonight. We need to discuss this as a board, which we're doing now, but we really do need to consider this. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. McGann?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to hear from the superintendent if she can sort of just kind of maybe let us know this for what what protocol she has in place. Just hearing what Dr. Hilton said, I know we have something in place, but can you, Madam Superintendent, kind of share with us as a board, maybe for clarity? I saw the numbers coming in, what you have in place to bring us to the numbers that we've been getting for the past weeks?
So sure, so good evening again. As some of the questions that Dr. Hilton proposed this evening, the first step is identifying those who are considered positive, whether it's a student or a staff member. In most cases, it's self-reporting, which is what it has been since we've encountered this pandemic. There are some students who are tested or identified by the school nurses because they are symptomatic, whether they have a fever, whether they're vomiting, whether they're displaying those symptoms that accompany COVID. And those students are immediately, their parents are immediately contacted. They are contained within the schoolhouse. There's a separate room aside from the nurses suite that we designated last year where those students are held, because if they are held in the classroom, they can continue the spread outside of the quarantine. Once a child has been notified or their parent has been notified, the contact tracing begins. And so because many of our students are not masked, because many of our students are within the parameters of the 3 to 6 feet and around one another more than 15 minutes, be it in the classroom, be it in the cafeteria, be it in the gymnasium, in the hallway, on the bus, all those factors are taken into consideration when the contact tracing begins. For our little children, sometimes they can tell us who they've been around, but oftentimes we rely on the class lists. For the high school, they can tell us who they were around, but in most cases, if you're a cheerleader, if you're a football player, if you're in a band, the number of students who you're exposed to is even greater. So the nurse begins working with the school administrators, and they begin the contact tracing. Once they've contact traced, there is a letter that is given to that child for their parents. Some cases it's mailed, but in most cases it's given to the child at that moment, and then it's followed by a personal phone call. The nurses have been, when I stated earlier, the nurses have been working till 9 and 10. They're calling people individually to say, your child has been identified potentially as a close contact. To go back to one of the questions Dr. Hilton proposed as well, is how do we know that those people who are self-reporting are actually telling the truth? In most cases, it's coming from the parent, or we are getting the information from DHEC. That information is then reported, and so there's a partnership with the school district and DHEC and the nurse. And Nurse Devine has a very close relationship as well as a point of contact, and so does Mr. Myers with representatives from DHEC. And so working with them, we are able to contact trace to figure who needs to be quarantined and who doesn't need to be quarantined. There are some cases where students 12 and above have been vaccinated. And so if those students are vaccinated, then they don't have to be quarantined. But because we don't have that documentation on hand, whether someone has been vaccinated or not, we have to take the parent's word for the fact that they've been vaccinated or fully vaccinated. The same goes for our staff. They're able to tell us whether they've been vaccinated or not, and that determines whether they have to be quarantined. What we have established at the onset of the school year, when we realized that we were going back to a place where we had been previously, 10 days based on the recommendations from the CDC, DHEC, and AAAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, what the quarantine days are. And so you have 10 or you have 14, and you could have 4 if you have a positive test. We are looking at the fact that there are large numbers of individuals who are coming in who could also be asymptomatic. And so the complexity comes in because we're a small district and we have so many families who attend our schools. We may have a child who's in the elementary school who was a close contact to a student who was positive, and then we may have someone in the secondary level who is in the same household. That has also been a question, does that child have to be quarantined? The answer to that is no, because they're a third party or tertiary contact. They don't have to be quarantined. But what we've been saying to our families is I would keep the students apart, but I would still continue to monitor their symptoms. I'm going to ask Nurse Devine to jump in, and I don't know if you've heard me, just to talk about protocols and procedures at any point that I may have missed or any point that I should have included. or something that needs to be reiterated. But as we have had the previous discussions, we have been strongly encouraging mask wearing. And I know there's language in the CDC guidelines that says if masks are properly being worn. I just violated just unintentionally as an adult. I took my mask off so that you can hear me. We have children who are still wearing their masks under their nose, on their chin, around their ear, and in other places. So in order to identify who has been a close contact, we have to make sure that we include those who are near and around that child, because we're not able to determine whether the child appropriately wore his or her mask throughout the entire school day. The child may have been sent to school with a mask on, but the question then becomes, is it properly being worn? I'm going to yield right now to Nurse Devine, and you may go ahead and jump in, and again, you can reiterate something that I may have stated or add additional information at this time.
Okay, yes. So, and board and Chairman Jackson and Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, I appreciate y'all having me tonight, and I hope everyone can hear me well enough. I just want to speak on the question about, like, how do we know if the positives are really positives and those kind of things. That can, of course, be a challenge, but we have a very direct relationship with DHEC and our DHEC contact. And so we share, when we report to DHEC, when we're notified about positive cases, the providers in the community that are actually administering the test are also mandated to report to DHEC, and so we compare that information. DHEC will confirm to me or any of the nurses if we need confirmation, say, hey, we found out or we've heard this, so all we need to do is just, we report, and then they'll report back to us if that wasn't in the system, or maybe we're reporting it before the provider gets it, but eventually it will meet up. And we also have DHEC notifying us of cases that are positive before maybe we're being notified by the parent. And so it's a team effort. It's a collaborative effort between us and DHEC, and we work very closely together. So we do have means of verifying whether there is truly a positive case. And as far as the quarantine period, we last year we were doing the 14-day quarantine for close contacts. This year we made the decision as a team to shift to the 10-day quarantine period with monitoring and masking, encouragement of masking for the remaining days 11 through 14, mainly because after day 10, according to CDC, the risk of developing the illness drops a pretty significant amount. It's about a 1% chance to an upper limit of 10%. So we felt that trying to maintain some consistency in the classroom for the students, and it just was maybe the route that we needed to try to go with that 10-day quarantine and see how that it worked for us as far as the district as a whole. And those are based on CDC and South Carolina DHEC guidelines. And so we follow the interim guidance that is put out from South Carolina DHEC. The most recent guidance that we are following is dated from July 29th. And if anything changes with the guidance, then I'm notified immediately from their district, like their regional director. We have a very close contact. We speak, the regional director and I speak probably weekly. The director or our contact tracer that's assigned as our district, we speak multiple times a day. So they let me know if anything is changed, and so then I can just disperse that out to the team of nurses, and we stay on top of it as best as we can. And obviously, it's a moving target. In this pandemic, we we do our best to stay on top, and then we are following DHEC interim guidelines. And so the quarantine period of 10 days, and then we ask that they mask and monitor for symptoms. Those remaining 4, of course, if symptoms developed, then we're asking that they isolate, whether it's staff or student. And if they're fully vaccinated and they're identified as a close contact, then according to DHEC recommendations, we can allow them to attend school or come to work as a staff member if they are masking as recommended and monitoring of symptoms through that normal quarantine period, which is still 14 days. The incubation period of the virus has not changed. It's still a 2 to 14 day incubation period. So that's where we are basing our decisions around, is everything from DHEC. And then, of course, anybody that tests positive is automatically on a 10-day isolation period from the date of test or the date of their symptom onset, if that's known.
And so in addition to the information, again, going back, oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. Where is all of this? Where is this information available for parents? Is it on the website? Is it at school? How do parents know what the regs are regarding, quarantine? Who gets quarantined? Why are you quarantined? How long you got to be quarantined? How do parents access that information?
So there are a couple of ways. The first thing is in our school reopening plan, which was presented, and there's a video of the presentation. It's on our back to school tab on our district website. In addition to the additional questions in terms of what do I do, each child is notified by the nurse. They're personally notified by the nurse. There's also a letter that goes out, and there's also phone calls that go out to the parent that says these are the number of days that your child is quarantined for. This is the date he or she can return. So it's all contained within the correspondence that goes home with the child. Is there anything that I may have missed? I talked about the phone calls, the letter, the school reopening plan. Is there something that I'm missing?
Yeah, it's also on the website. We have our quarantine and isolation protocols, and we also have the mitigation strategies as well on our website. This information was also sent to all users, so y'all would have received it as well. So all of our schools and all of our employees have all of these documents as well.
And I would like to add that on the letter that goes out to parents about the close contact quarantine, or if it is a positive student letter or staff or student letters, there is we've included the link on there to South Carolina DHEC site that takes them straight to the COVID-19 for schools information as well. And those letters are mostly emailed to the parents. Now there's some that are mailed out, but the information is still within the letter as far as the web address and all. But if it's emailed to them, then there's a link that's in the letter.
It's just, and I think we all got some emails today about the same thing. I think parents are still wanting more information that's more, the letter going home is fine, but I think parents are wanting more information that they can access more easily rather than looking at the video. I'm just hearing that parents don't know what the protocols are and what the rules are. So anything we can do to provide more information to parents, I think would be helpful.
So Ms. Galloway, if you would bring that information that's out that Dr. Hilton just referenced in terms of the protocol and the procedures, if we could pull out from our reopening information and put that directly on the front, on the splash page, if you will, so that they won't have to go look for it. But we can definitely bring that to the forefront. I spoke with some individuals today, and the concern wasn't necessarily about the protocol, but it was about knowing who the individual student was. And so when we're following FERPA and HIPAA, the letter does not contain the who. and where, because we can't disclose that information. But when it comes down to the protocol and the procedures and what needs to occur, our nurses are discussing that with our parents. It's on the 2 documents that we have on the website that will now be brought forward. It's in the letter, if we can think of another way in which we can communicate that information, I would be glad to do so. The last thing I want is for our parents to be confused, but we have it out there and we'll just bring it out forward. And what we could also do, Ms. Galloway, is to make sure principals have it and send it out through EduLink again.
I'll also share it on social media too.
That's fine.
And you know what y'all just told us, is it's good information if it is all together where the parents can see it. But you also, probably need to address the absences and makeup work, because I've got concerns about that. They're not understanding, how that impacts their child. So if you might want to address that now for us.
And so when a student is absent, they are receiving a specific code. Dr. McLeod, you want to jump in here and talk about the coding as we continue to talk about the ways in which we code our children? We had one coding that we were going to utilize, but because we have the 5% threshold that we can't go over, we can't use that code, because then we would be documented as exceeding that virtual number. So Dr. McLeod, are you prepared to, or do you want me to do it, to talk about the coding or the absences or the quarantine time for our children?
Give me just a second and I'll pull it up because we got new guidance on it this morning, which we shared.
So again, while she's looking for that, the guidance is again fluid. It's constantly evolving and changing, because I don't think anybody anticipated us being in this space. But we know we cannot penalize kids, if you will, for having to be quarantined.
And that's what they need to know, that they're excused.
Yes, ma'am. So Jay, that may not, Dr. McLeod or Dr. Hafner, you're nodding. Do you want to jump in there? I called Dr. McLeod because I knew we had talked about it. But if you want to jump in there.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. I don't have the notes in front of me, but what I recall is that on the surface, what will be seen at the school is the SCBTP, but that our Power School folks will go in and add a specific code that is specifically related to the code of quarantine, and it is an excuse. But it doesn't count in our virtual learning academy BTP. It's different because the way it's coded behind the scenes.
That's correct. And right now, if the students are not physically present due to the isolation or quarantine, and they are physically unable to complete the assignments because they are ill, that should be considered an absence and covered with SC flu right now. So parents may see that that's because the State Department is working to establish a new SC COVID code that will replace that in Power School, to know the difference between the students who are not showing any symptoms that are being quarantined versus the ones who are. So we're not penalizing those children for being ill either.
So what the plan is, Ms. Addison has actually been working with the attendance clerks, and they've been in discussion quite frequently. If a student has been out and they come back and we recognize they've been quarantined, then that coding will change. But we can definitely make sure we create a document that's parent-friendly. You all hear that? We'll create a document that's parent-friendly so that they'll understand the protocol in terms of a student being quarantined and then making it work. Okay?
And where do they get their makeup work?
From their individual teacher.
Is it online? or-
So good question. So the question is, where will they get their work? We have 2 platforms that can be used. Many of our teachers are already fluid with Google Classroom, so they can load their information in Google Classroom, but there are some who are also utilizing Schoology. And so it depends on the school and it depends on the teacher, but in most cases, it has been. Dr. McLeod, do you know which one is being used the most? Is it still Google Classroom?
Currently, it's split as we're transitioning. Some of the schools are ahead of others. They don't included all that information in their orientations with parents so that they know how to access. But Google Classroom is still available for those teachers to starting to make that transition.
And we can streamline that information to go across the district from each one of our schools.
Follow-up. Dr. Martin Knox, know we talked about the students and them not being penalized and exposure. What about our teachers and our staff? I mean, have we had any issues with maybe teachers coming in contact or needing to take time off and not being penalized or whatever? Can you talk to me about that?
Sure, I can. So one of the things that we've done, we value our staff. And so one of the things that we've talked about and one of the things that we've done is when we know that we have to quarantine staff for 10 days, it's at no fault of their own. So we've not been charging staff, any staff, 10 days while they're quarantined. So they will still be compensated for those 10 days that they're out. And it's for the one time that they've been quarantined. Many of our staff aren't impacted by this because they have been vaccinated, but we have some who have not been vaccinated for various reasons. But for the 10 days that they have to quarantine or that they've been isolated, they do not get charged their time. And that's something we elected to do as a district.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Ms. Lawson?
Yes, Madam Chair. The item this past week ran a story on the situation here in Sumter where we had 129 cases, 129 positive cases in the district where we started the school year without masks. In one of our neighboring districts, I won't share the name of the district, but a neighboring district that has a student population that's about 7,000 students more than ours and a personnel staff that's about double ours. And they implemented masks before the start of school. And in their district, there's only been 42 positive cases. So we know that masks in schools do work, and we can see that in the evidence from a neighboring district. Now, I know there's a lot of concern regarding the proviso that was passed in the appropriations bill, but we have to look at the language that was used in the appropriation proviso that speaks to not being able to utilize state funding to implement or to mandate a mask wearing in schools or in our school facilities. And as we know with COVID, it also brought us a lot of federal dollars and resources to safely reopen schools. My position is that we don't have to utilize state dollars to implement a mask mandate in this district. We have funds that's available. We had donations of masks from community partners since last year. And I don't think that we should neglect the fact that we took an oath when we each were elected to protect and defend the Constitution of this state and the United States, and ultimately to protect and defend our kids against enemies foreign and domestic. And right now the enemy is COVID. So we should be utilizing every resource that we have to protect our students, our staff, and ultimately our communities at hand. And I know some discussion previously at our last meeting regarding death shields. I know that our student population that's 12 and under don't have the ability to be vaccinated. So I'm asking that we implement death shields in all of our elementary and middle schools to safeguard our students, in addition to the face mask implementation as well. And I think the face mask wearing should be district-wide. Whether it be on our buses or in our facilities, we need to be wearing masks to try to control the transmission of COVID within our district.
Okay, Diane. Dr. Hilton?
Thank you. Regarding the proviso, it's very confusing and curious to me. As I read the proviso, I don't see where it says the state has the authority to take any of our money, even if we require masks. It says, no school district or any of its schools may use any funds appropriated or authorized pursuant to this act to require that its students or employees wear a face mask at any of its educational facilities. This prohibition extends to the announcement or enforcement of such policy. So it says, use any funds appropriated to require that its students or employees wear a mask. We don't need to use any funds to require a mask. All we have to do is say masks are required. It's not gonna use any funds. All of that business about taking the money came from an interpretation from the governor and the attorney general. The State Department also sent out a memo that said face masks could result in loss of, mandating face masks could result in a loss of funds. I don't see anything in this proviso that says the state can take our money if we mandate face masks. My personal opinion. Thank you.
Okay, let's let others weigh in that have weighed in.
Yeah, my question is for Michelle. Michelle, several times you referred to masking being recommended, highly recommended. And the question is twofold. Is that because from DHEC, is that because of the governor's position, or is that coming from CDC?
I'm sorry, Dr. Baker, I couldn't understand the first part of your question.
You know, in several references you made masking as highly recommended and highly encouraged. And my question is that DHEC saying that because of the governor's position, or is this coming from CDC down to DHEC?
The masking recommendations are coming from CDC, and then it comes down to South Carolina DHEC, and the DHEC adopts the recommendations from CDC and applies them appropriately as they determine from South Carolina DHEC side to implement in the state. So really, I guess it starts at CDC and then it eventually comes through South Carolina DHEC, and that's where, when we get our guidance, our interim guidance, it's from South Carolina DHEC, but it originates from CDC often.
Okay.
So the mask recommendation and wearing of the mask indoors, even with fully vaccinated people, as they've seen that, there's breakthrough cases with the fully vaccinated with this Delta variant. The Delta variant is very different compared to, last year, the variant of COVID that we were challenged with, you would have maybe a positive person, and this is according to CDC information that was recently put out at the end of July. You would have a positive person that would maybe result in a transmission of 2 other cases. So like a 1 to 2. Now it's the rate of transmission for the Delta seems to be more like almost double. So more like a 1 to 5, more 1 to 4 or 5. So it's more contagious. And so that's where they kind of go back with that recommendation of masking indoors if you're in crowded areas and indoors, as far as because of those breakthrough cases, and I believe that they found the Delta variant just seems to be more contagious at this time.
And my second question, you mentioned that we get information from DHEC about positive cases. Where does DHEC get that information from? If I take my grandchild to the doctor and my grandchild's diagnosed with COVID, does the doctor's office turn that in to DHEC, or is that the pipeline by which we get the information?
Yes, anyone that is administering the COVID test are required to report those results to DHEC. Actually, the providers are required to report all positive and negative results to DHEC. So, and then we, in turn, in the school district side, we are required to report anytime that we're notified of it or we're aware of a case, then we are required to report that to DHEC as well, within 24 hours. So those two things eventually meet and we can compare, but, so we do use DHEC as our resource daily.
And I know as a school district, we have to walk a tight line between HIPAA and FERPA with our students. So I was just curious how all of that tied in. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to, if I may, add just a little more to the question that Dr. Baker posed. We utilize the language strongly encouraged, strongly recommended in alignment with the CDC's guidelines and the American Association of Pediatrics, because we need to safeguard our children. And so whatever we could do to get our children to wear masks, that's what we've been doing, and that's the language that we've been utilizing. But we've also tried to make sure that we're in compliance with the proviso, because not knowing where that funding source will be impacted, I don't believe the safeguarding of our children. I don't believe that the safeguarding of our children should have a dollar sign on it. Our children should be safe each and every day. But I will say that not knowing where those financial impacts or the penalties will come from, we have to make sure we can still run a school district. And I hear all of the unclarity or uncertainty with the laws themselves, but again, we still need to provide education. And so to your point, in order to encourage as many kids as we possibly can and as many parents to join along with us so we can minimize the disruption that occurs in our school, but more importantly, to safeguard every single one of our children, that's why we use the language strongly recommended. And again, there's some little wiggle room in there when it comes down to the buses, but understand when we first started the school year, the language was we could not mandate masks anywhere. And then there was a shift that we could possibly mandate it on the buses because the buses weren't owned by the but it was federal guidelines that were implemented that said we should not be mandating, that we could mandate masks on a bus. So I just want others to understand our children are our most prized possession. And so during these times while we're trying to navigate through, the feedback that you provide, that we receive, we take it into consideration, again, to meet the 15,000 plus children that we have enrolled in our school district. Because if they are ill, then it translates to the community, which means we become a hot spot yet again. And lives are being lost. There are children, and if no one has done the homework around our hospitals, our pediatric units are filled with children who are ill. I can't stress it enough. Wear the masks. That's the only way, as well as getting vaccinated. I can't mandate you to, I can't mandate the vaccinations, but I will do whatever is possible to make sure we are safeguarding our children. We cannot put them in harm's way, but in the same token, we can't take a financial hit anyway, either way. And so I just need to put that out on the table that no one is making a decision to bring harm to our children, and I think we all want to do what's best for our children. But in these times of uncertainty, with not having clarity in the proviso, that is another concern. And so I need to say that is a concern. We are looking at children each and every day, and you receive the numbers. I'm just looking at the schools still operating. The language that was used last year is to make sure that we can continue to operate our schools with the appropriate staff. Our staff is being impacted. So we're going to get to a point where we're not going to have enough staff, whether it's a bus driver, food service, teachers, to provide adequate instruction to our children or safeguarding the day. And so again, the language strongly recommending, strongly encouraging. And when I've gone to schools this week, and so people are like, why are you still in and out of school? Because I need to see what's happening in our buildings. If I'm expecting my leaders to be there and I'm expecting children to be there, I need to be able to go in to see what's happening. And I will say, a lot of our children are wearing masks. However, the number of times I have to stop a child and say, baby, do me a favor, pull it up over your nose, just to go back and revisit the appropriate way to wear a mask, or making sure that the sanitizer is filled, or to make sure that the filters have been changed. All those factors, there's not one strategy that can be utilized in isolation that can guarantee the safety of our children. It has to be a combination of everything. And so I just needed to put that out on the table to make sure there's an understanding that I don't want my children sick. I don't want my children to lose their lives as a result of this. I don't want my staff to succumb to this virus. but it is impacting the district across the nation like no one else has ever seen. And so we need to do it, and we need to get it right, whatever the direction is we go in. And just as long as my children are safe and can learn, I'm good.
Who's had it?
I just want to say that I definitely agree with Brian and Dr. Martin Knox. But I think we do need to be careful, Johnny, on what, the point you bring up on the proviso, how do I pronounce it? Proviso. But the fact that the school staff is funded by state funds is the key here. So if you enforce a mask wear, you in effect are using state funds. So I think that's the important part, and the caution. But again, I think it is quite ridiculous that we are stuck in this situation, and that safety should come first, and that we need to all wear masks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mills. All right.
Yes, ma'am. I was agreeing with what Dr. Martin Knox was saying. We definitely want the children to be safe. Well, we also can't afford to lose the funding that we use to pay our faculty and staff, that we use for the student support that we have for them. Buses, like I said, teachers in the classroom, the buses. What do we do when we lose them? And I'm not saying that we're definitely going to lose them, but there's that chance. We don't know, just like the uncertainty of the funding loss that Dr. Martin Knox was talking about. I mean, we've got to think about a lot more than just the mask right now. And it's not just the mask, it's the health of everybody involved.
Okay, after heard from Dr. Lee, I'll go to her next.
Yes, I mean, very much agree with Dr. Knox, and thank you for the update, because I have been getting phone calls and emails as well, so a lot of what you said was in clarity. The one thing I was asked is, are masks available for a child if they want one when they get to the schoolhouse? If they ask for it, and that's what a couple of people have been asking, is the availability of the masks there once they get their child to school and they think about it, that they really need to have it. So again, as far as the fundings and everything, I give my support as in what we need to do for the good of the school and for the children as well as our staff.
And in terms of the masks, we were very fortunate and have been very fortunate that we received donations from our business partners and from our community. Many of the masks we received are from pediatrics, for our younger children, but we've also invested, when we had our ESSER funds, we invested in face masks. And again, we didn't discard our PPE equipment. And it's funny you would ask about the availability of masks. Even our children know that the masks are available. I was in a school the other day and a second grader walked in and said, I need a mask. And the secretary gave her a mask. So the masks are definitely available. Our bus drivers have masks as well, just in case there's a child who gets on the bus and needs a mask. But we have that equipment readily available for children.
Michelle has something to say. Dr. Martin. Michelle
I'm sorry.
has something she needs to.
Okay, just one moment. Michelle, did you have something additional to say?
Yes, I just wanted to, just to make sure to clarify so there isn't confusion, especially for, the parents. The masking is definitely recommended. It is definitely a CDC guideline, DCAT guideline. It is a mitigating strategy to decrease the transmission because of the respiratory droplets, and so that's the way that this virus seems to spread. So masking is definitely one very strong mitigating strategy to try to prevent transmission, but it doesn't remove, the mask does not take the place of social distancing recommendations. And so I just want to make sure that that's clarified, because when we're determining close contact, we have guidelines that we're going by that determine, like, it's distance and time is what we are having to identify, those students or staff members that were within that 3 or 6 feet different distance to the positive case for that greater than, or 15 minutes cumulative in the 24-hour period. And so if they're masked, then obviously their risk is going to go lower for transmitting or contracting. But it's not the only piece of the mitigation, and it's also not the only thing that is considered when we're trying to identify close contacts. So just want to make sure that everybody was clear on that.
Thank you, Ms. I saw another hand. I not recognize someone. Okay, who's first, Brian? You.
Matt.
No, I was just gonna go with what Dr. Martin Knox was saying about, the secretary or the person at the front desk having a box of masks. Does each classroom, each teacher also have them where they can handle it, or could we do that if it's not being done now?
So.
And they offer it every morning.
So I know that we have the boxes in the buildings and the administrators distribute them. Sam, do you know if any of our schools are distributing masks to teachers, or are they just all housed in one place, or is it a combination of both?
Well, in some instances, it's a combination of both, but we sent bulk masks to all of the administrators, and they can distribute them as they're requested.
So we can definitely put them, I think what we were thinking is touching them and contaminating them. And so I know that we put together packets of masks and gloves, but that was for the teacher, correct?
That is correct.
So we put together these care packages, if you will, that had masks and gloves and some other items in them, but they were for the teachers. But we can definitely look to give them to the classroom teacher. We can have that dialogue with the leaders.
That would be good just to offer it. Anybody want to ask this morning?
All right, Brian, you got your answer? I mean, Matt, did you get your answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we'll go now to Brian.
I hear everyone's concern, and it's my concern as well as far as the funding piece. And something that Dr. Hilton said at our last meeting really stuck with me. And he said, what's the price of a child's life? We're dealing with human lives and a deadly virus. There's not a price tag that we can place on a child or a staff member's life. If a child succumbs to this illness, we're going to lose the per pupil funding for that child. So for us to have the conversation of, yes, we're concerned about funding, I understand it. I know where we have been as a district. When we see our larger districts, and we see one of the smallest districts in this state implement a mask mandate, and this smallest district in the state was taken over by the State Department of Education with a state-appointed board that implemented a mask mandate. There's no reason why we as a district should be in fear of losing funding when we should be in fear of losing staff and students to a virus. We all have an obligation to not only the students and staff, but our communities that set us around these days. And that obligation is to ensure that our students are receiving an education. Last year we heard from the community, we want 5 days face-to-face instruction. The only way we're going to get 5 days face-to-face instruction that's not broken up because of quarantine is if we mandate a mask. Telling a person to wear a mask is like telling a person to put on a seatbelt. You're going to do it because it's a choice that you make. But if it's a requirement, then you're going to be able to enforce it. There's enough creative minds around this day, this evening, where we can find a way to not utilize state funding. We have SROs in our buildings. We have volunteers in our buildings. We have staff that's been hired using ESSER funds. That's not state dollars that's paying these individual salaries. We have to come up with creative ideas to actually implement the safety mechanisms and to put them in place to safeguard our students, our staff, and our communities. We can't sit around these days and make the comparison that, oh, we're going to lose funding. If a state-appointed board has implemented a mask mandate, and I can't say that enough. A state-appointed board has implemented a mask mandate with the backing of the state superintendent of education. I don't see, and I agree with Dr. Hilton, I don't see any language in this proviso, and this is not an attack on anyone, so I don't want it to be taken that way. There is no language in here that speaks to taking our funding. And if our funding is under attack, then we need to fight as a district. Because like Dr. Marnock said, we have nothing more precious than our students and our staff that make up Sumter School District. This district operates because of the students and staff that make it up every day. So I think we need to look around the table, come up with ideas to not utilize state funding. I don't know if we have enough desk shields in the district. If not, then we need to look at purchasing more or asking neighboring districts that are no longer utilizing theirs and put them in our classes, in our elementary and middle school classrooms where our students are not able to get vaccinated. I haven't heard it tonight, but the thing that should be strongly encouraged is being vaccinated. I know we cannot mandate that, but that is something that needs to be strongly encouraged. And as Nurse Devine said, it has to be a collaborative approach. We have to continue with the mask wearing. We have to continue encouraging people to get vaccinated. The hand sanitizing, the social distancing, all of those things have to be in place. We can't say we're going to do all of these and then leave this part out. Thank you.
Now,
Yes.
Madam Superintendent, I've heard so much about mandates and provisos. Our attorney is here. Can you check? Can you be so kind to see if she has anything? Maybe she wants to share her thoughts on this since we're discussing this at this time. We're talking about masks. I mean, see if she wants to share some thoughts.
That would be a legal briefing.
Yeah.
Legal briefings are done in executive session. Legal briefings are done in executive session.
We can, confer with the attorney when we go into executive session for legal briefing on that. And that's why she is here to advise us legally. But let me just say this, we know our responsibilities. I think that all of us know and feel that what is needed, but we have to think there is no box, you have to think beyond and do those things. But by the same token, we also have to stay fiscally sound in order to afford what we want to do. Do we have anyone else that wants to address that concern at this time? And it will be discussed further in executive session.
You'll get a legal briefing.
Yeah, we'll get the legal briefing.
I move you just bring it on to a close since we're gonna be talking about it later. Attorney, we just go and close it out till we be here all night.
So, you're saying that we would need a motion to that
I
effect?
don't need a motion.
You don't need a motion?
You
Okay.
should close that item of discussion and move to the superintendent.
Okay, well, we will take 2 more questions on this item, or 2 more comments on this item. And if we have more than that, we'll ask you to hold those comments until later. So do we have anyone else that would like to speak to this?
I just want a clarification from Dr. Martin Knox. Are we using the desk shields, or is it left up to the school to make a decision?
So based on conversation that I had with the principals, it is the principal's discretion working with their teachers to determine the utilization for the desk shields. And I can say for the most part, most of our teachers are using desk shields. They're using them differently, and it's based on the configuration in their classroom. One of the things that the elementary principals brought up, because most of our shields, when we initially purchased them, these were the first ones that we had purchased, but the ones that we were given by the state are the ones that look like a poster board and a trifold with a handle in it. One of the things that the elementary principals brought up was that these shields were too heavy and they were afraid for the safety of our children utilizing because they've been falling and etc. So with the smaller kids, they've indicated that, of course, they prefer to have it as an option in their classroom. But there have been some parents who said, I want my child to have a shield. In that case, they are given a shield, one that's accommodating to their size. But again, we have the shields that are available. There are some schools, I went to a high school the other day where The chairs are sitting in a row, and let's say there were 1 through 5 chairs, where one had a chair, seat 1 had a student, seat 2 had a shield, seat 3 had, so it depends on the configuration of the room and the teachers making it work within their classroom. But again, if a parent requests a shield, then they get a shield. But it is the discretion with the principal and that teacher.
So I thought,
Last question, comment, okay?
I thought we were told earlier that every class in the district had face shields, that they were available to every classroom in the district. Did I misunderstand that?
You said they're available, but they're not utilized.
We're not requiring.
So there's no district policy regarding these shields?
The mandating shields, no, sir.
Okay, we appreciate the discussion on that this evening, but we will move on and we will get legal briefing on this when we move into executive session. So now we're down to the superintendent's report. And Dr. Martin Knox, please proceed with the items listed under this section.
Yes, ma'am. So good evening again. At this time, I'd ask Ms. Jennifer Miller to proceed to Superintendent's Report 5.1, the Office of Finance, General Fund Revenue and Expenditures through June 30th, 2021, as of August 16th, 2021. Ms. Miller? And she's not at her desk. I have to wait for Ms. Miller to come back to her desk. Anything you put her so we can see when she returns? I don't know if she knows. There she is. Hi, Ms. Miller. We've been waiting for you.
I apologize about that. Good evening, Chairwoman Dr. Barbara Jackson, Vice Chair Dr. Frank Baker, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. This evening, we have the June 30th, 2021 revenue and expenditures for the general fund as of August 16th, 2021. The projected revenue was adjusted by $1.3 million. The local tax revenue was $434,000 more than projected. While it is higher than projections, we still need to adjust for year-end accounts receivable and deferred revenue. As mentioned last month, please note that the county is working on reconciling and closing out the year, and the tax revenue number projected could change depending on those adjustments. We are still awaiting the 60-day collection report from the county, which will not be available until August 30th to complete those adjustments. Additionally, the district did receive approximately $600,000 more in revenue codes 3840, 3890, which is your manufacturing reimbursement and other state property tax, state level tax revenue. The district also received approximately $128,000 of excess EFA funding, revenue code 3392. And then lastly, the district did receive a one-time legal settlement of $80,000. This takes the total projected revenue for fiscal year 21 to $129,136,599. Moving on to expenditures, we are continuing to accrue the June 30th expenditures for the modified accrual basis of reporting required for the annual audit financial statements. No significant change in expenditure projections have been made at this time. The indirect cost category within the other financing sources did increase by approximately $200,000 based on grant claims. Overall, projected change in fund balance is $8,256,241. Next on the agenda, we have the general fund revenue and expenditures through July 31st, 2021. I have adjusted the revenue projections based on known situations, revenue code 3992,
State Forestry Commission was decreased by approximately $43,000 based on the actual check received and presented to the board last month. Please keep in mind that we will need to adjust state revenue for any decrease in enrollment. Expenditure projections have not been adjusted as we are at the start of the year. We will begin projecting salaries after we get through the September 30th and the first payroll one with all the new hires in the system for a more accurate payroll projection. Next, we'll talk about the capital projects update as of July 31st, 2021. You have funds 519 through 526. They have been rolled over for the budget roll forward for fiscal year 22. You will notice that some of them have collapsed the line items for an item that was originally budgeted and spent and paid for in the prior year. It is no longer showing, just to try to summarize the information for the board. Do you have any questions on that?
Yes, Dr. Baker?
Yes, Jennifer, my questions are on your general fund information. And I want to come back to these two areas that I brought up several times. One is the vocational, and we closed out with, I guess, 2.1 million less than what we had projected for 2021. And this year, for 2022, you've got projected $4,948,000, and that's a big difference between the 6980. And so my question is, what did you use to arrive at that figure for this year's budget versus the figure for last year's budget?
As we discussed before, last year's budget was actually the fiscal year 20's budget, which was much higher. The actual amount of revenue received last year for this code was $4.8 million. The projection this year is $4.9 million, and that is using the formula and the spreadsheet, which is reconciled to the state's allocation of the EFA funding.
Right, I understand.
It's based on student counts, and we projected a 130 increase from our 135th day count last year, which was 15,081 students. We projected 15,211 students, and it was weighted based on the percentages of allocation last year.
Right, and that was my question. That was my question. I knew that the old budget rolled over because of the uncertainty of everything. But my question was really, what data do we use? And you said based on the 135th day. That's I understood you correctly, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, you did say that the data you used was based on the most recent 135th day enrollment. And the same thing.
It was.
Go
We
ahead.
started with the 135th day, but we did increase it slightly, 130 students, because we were hopeful that we would not have that low of an enrollment with children back in the school for fiscal year 22. So instead of using 15,081.9, we used the 15,211.
And the same thing would apply to the speech handicap situation also?
With speech, yes, sir, it'd be the same thing. We took the 135th day count, and then we adjusted for an increase of 130 students allocated based on the same percentage of the funding we received last year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 updates. You should have a presentation for that in Google Slides, Ms. Hanson. And if you move to the second slide here, this is the ESSER 1 update as of July 31st. You can see the first column there, which was the original budget, which was approximately $5.6 million.
We have spent $4.7 million through July 31st. We have encumbered another close to $800,000, which takes us to a total of $5,520,747, leaving $61,843 left to spend. Of that remaining amount, you can see the first category there is category 5. This was a rebate. We had spent the money and then received a rebate from the vendor, so we now have additional funding that we can spend that we didn't originally plan on being able to spend because of that rebate. And then the last category, 12, other, that actually relates to the private schools allocation that is up to the private schools to spend. Moving on to the ESSER 2 update. Again, this is as of July 31st. And you can see the first column is the budget, which was $23,562,630. We have spent so far $5.58. We have encumbered an additional $6.2 million, taking us to a total amount spent or encumbered of $11,822,330. Leaving a remaining amount to be spent of $11,740,300. All right, and if there are no questions, we can move on to the ESSER 3 spending plan.
I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Miller, Dr. Baker.
Yes, I do, under the ESSER 1 and the ESSER 2, Jennifer, and Dr.
Yes.
Martin Knox may answer this question rather than you, but under mental health services, what did that include?
You got it, Jennifer?
If I'm understanding the question, you're asking what is in the mental health service category?
Yeah, what services were we providing and who provided them?
That is the either employment or contracting of social workers.
So basically, it's salaries
Yes.
for
Yes,
contracted
sir.
Yes.
social workers?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and my second question, how many years can we carry over? We got a big chunk of money left for summer learning. How many years can we carry that money forward?
The ESSER 1 expires September 30th, 2022, so that's next September, and we only have $60,000 left to spend in that amount that hasn't been encumbered already. And then ESSER 2, we have until September 30th, 2023 to spend that. And so some of those budgets are assuming that it will carry out all the way through September 30th, 2023.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
In the ESSER 2 funds, could you explain what the implementation of procedures would be and then what would be included in other activities?
Yes, the implementation of procedures, those are some technology enhancements that I believe we have discussed previously. And then the other activities is anything that enables the continuity of education, activities that are necessary to maintain the operation and continuities of services in the school district. So it can be to employ existing staff. It can be, this is also where we put our indirect costs. When you have a grant, you're allowed to charge an indirect cost rate. That is charged here. This is where we are paying for the contract accountant to keep up with all of the bookkeeping related to the ESSER funds. I have to go back into all my details to look at exactly what was in 1 and 2. When we get to 3, I can tell you exactly what's in that one now. I was just giving the update on this one, but those are allowable categories to continue operation of the school district.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No questions?
You ready for 3?
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. So 5.5, the ESSER 3 spending plan. Ms. Miller?
All right, we're gonna go over the ESSER 3 spending plan at this time. I'd like to thank those participating in the development of this plan. A committee was formed, which included the executive team members, 3 principals, 3 assistant principals, 3 teachers across all school levels. We had 2 virtual meetings. First meeting was to discuss the allowable expenditures, and the second meeting was to allow committee members to provide the feedback they obtained from their respective schools and peers. Input was also obtained from the Sumter community, which included the Board of Trustees, parents, students, teachers, support staff, and community stakeholders who responded to the survey related to the ESSER 3 reopening and spending plan. Additionally, input was obtained from the teachers during a teacher advisory council meeting, and also input was obtained from the reopening school task force. We wanted to present the spending plan to the boards this evening prior to the submission to the State Department for approval. And please keep in mind that this plan will fluctuate depending on the approval and the needs of the district that we reassess on a going basis. The 15 allowable categories are listed on this slide. We are allocated $53 million with ESSER 3 funds that must be spent by September 30th, 2024. There are 15 allowable categories, as I mentioned. 14 of those are the exact same as the ESSER 2 categories. There is 1 new category. The new category is number 15, developing strategies and implementing public health protocol, and that replaced an old category, which was provisions for principals and school leaders that was in ESSER 2. And then going forward, I'll provide details in each of the categories. As you can see here, the budget is $52,956,305. The 3 biggest categories where amounts have been allocated make up 89% of that amount, or $47 million. But first, we're going to start with the smaller categories at the top of that pie chart. The first one is technology equipment and software, which was 1%, or $151,000. Moving to the right, facility repairs of $1 million, which is approximately 2%. Continuing, we have $1 million for sanitization, or 2%. Next is mental health, $1.2 million, or 2%. Next, the development of procedures, $1.9 million, or 4%. Then moving to those large 3 categories, the first one there in green is the air quality improvements to the HVAC system. There's $8 million budgeted, or 15%. Then addressing the learning loss, we have 37% budgeted into that, or $19.6 million. We are required to have at least 20% budgeted in that category. And then lastly, the other category has $19.7 million, or 37%, and I'll break that down further as we move through the slides. So first, on this next slide, category 3, activities to address the unique needs of students. This is contract instructional services. These are for children that need virtual schooling because they have significant cognitive disabilities and are not able to attend in-person instruction. We have $151,000 budgeted there. Category 4, development and implementation of procedures and systems. Just like ESSER 2, this is for your technology enhancements and your project manager. We have $1.8 million budgeted here. The project manager is to oversee the enhancements to the technology and the upgrades to the HVAC system that are funded through the ESSER funds in a separate category. Next, category 6, which is your sanitization services and supplies. This includes things such as your personal protective equipment, your PPE, your hand sanitizer, the dispensers for the hand sanitizer, the cleaning supplies, wipes, desk shields, and electric spray guns. We have a little over $1 million budgeted in this category. Next, category 8, purchase of educational technology. We have an amount budgeted for Chromebooks and software. and we have approximately $238,000 budgeted in this category. Category 9, your mental health services and support. In this category, we have 1 psychologist, we have social workers, 3 social workers, and then we have supplies for the psychologists and the social workers. And then we also have social and emotional support budgeted in this category. Category 11, addressing the learning loss. This is through the implementation of evidence-based interventions such as summer learning, summer enrichment, extended day, comprehensive after-school programs. We have salaries and benefits budgeted for each of these categories. We have $19.6 million budgeted. And moving to 12, your school facility repairs and improvements. This is for carpeting. The carpeting will be replaced in areas within the facility to help to reduce the risk of transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards and to support student health needs. We have $1 million budgeted in this category. Moving to category 13, this is your improvements to your indoor air quality in school facilities. This relates to our HVAC upgrades and replacements. And then category 15, this is your other categories. This is, again, the activities necessary to maintain the operation and continuity of services in the local educational agency. In this category, we have continuity of employment. If you recall, when we budgeted for the general fund, we had 33 positions that we moved over to ESSER, so that's to fund those positions. We have student furniture budgeted in this category for approximately $5 million, or 25% of this. Your indirect costs that I mentioned that can be charged to grants, that is $6 million, or 31% of this. And that continuity of employments, that was 20% of this. So 76% of this other categories is budgeted in those 3 categories. And then additionally, this is where the virtual academy is budgeted. We also have nurses that are being funded out of this. We have instructional coaches being funded out of this, technical support staff, the bookkeeper for the grants, and then health equipment is included in this category as well. Are there any questions on the spending plan?
Any questions for Dr. Baker?
Jennifer, you mentioned under category 9 that we have 3 social workers being paid out of that. Now, are those just our district social workers, not the ones we're contracting?
Ms. Davis, did you want to?
We currently have 1 contract social worker, and we have 2 additional social workers that apply directly to the district. They're not being contracted through a contract agency.
So we have 2 district social workers then?
We have 3 district social workers
That are not
And we would
paid out of
receive-
these, that are not paid out of these ESSER funds.
That's correct.
And all these other social workers that are contracted are paid out of ESSER funds, and how many of those do we have in the district?
For my departments, we have 5 nurses that are contract nurses, and we have the social worker that is a contract social worker.
So we're paying $500,000 for 1 contracted social worker?
No, we do have other social workers, they're just not through a contract agency.
So I believe what's happening is we have 2 district employee social workers that are being paid with ESSER funds, and 1 contract social worker being paid with ESSER funds. And then I believe we have an additional social worker employee that's paid with general fund.
So we
For a
don't,
total of 4 social workers, is that correct, Ms.
And
Davis?
plus, we had the 3 that was already on staff through our Title I people.
which are Title I, or are they general fund? Are the 3 district ones that are on staff, are they paid for out of Title I funds or general fund?
We have 3 social workers that are paid out of Title I funds. We have an additional social worker that is on staff that works with the district out of general funds. And then we received the 3 additional positions through ESSA. One of those social worker is paid through a contract agency and the other is paid through ESSA funds.
Okay, so let me make sure I got it right. So we got 3 paid out of ESSA funds. So that amounts to $500 and some odd thousand for 3 people.
You have to keep in mind that's to get us through September 30th, 2024. So it's
Okay.
multiple years of salaries.
Okay, and if we had some kind of footnote about that, that would help. That's just a suggestion. Because we often forget, well, we don't necessarily know guidelines on how long the money will carry over.
We can do that, that's fine. Because what it looks like, and I think to Dr. Baker's point, it looks like that 500,000 is just for this year and not the carryover until the funds expire. Am I?
Yeah, you're right. And the way it looks is it looks like with that amount, it had already been expended. Because it's a zero balance there, on the previous slide.
You mean on the pie chart?
Yeah. So, just a footnote or something that would explain that would be helpful.
Sure. And this plan is fluid, if I may. Are you finished, Jennifer, or can I jump in? So this plan is fluid. It has not been sent in and approved yet. So it will be sent in, and so it could require some adjustments, but we will keep you informed regarding moving forward. That's all I had to say.
Any additional questions?
And the final thing, or the final things, Jennifer, 5.6, the Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Plan. And
Yes, ma'am.
And if you would follow by 5.7, the Minority Business Semi-Annual Presentation.
Yes, the Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Plan for fiscal year 21-22 is before the board this evening. There's been no change in that plan from the prior year. And then moving on to the Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Plan semi-annual presentation. You heard last month from our procurement auditor that gave you the updates on results from the procurement audit for fiscal year 20. This is the information for fiscal year 21. The board was presented information in January related to the first part of the fiscal year. So this evening, we're going to talk about the second part of the fiscal year. Just a reminder that small or minority businesses must be certified with the South Carolina Division of Small and Minority Business Contracting and Certification to be eligible to be included in this calculation. The Sumter School District vendor application has a section on it to indicate that a vendor is a minority business. And then semi-annually, we are comparing our vendors list with the SMBCC, that's the smaller minority business group, with our listing to make sure we have properly categorized our vendors. Moving on to the next slide. All of our bids are advertised with the South Carolina Business Opportunities. Again, January 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2021, there were 3 bids received from certified minority businesses. One of those bidders was successful in obtaining the bid. We are currently doing business with 4 certified minority businesses, and then the amount spent in the second half of the fiscal year was $94,920. So the total for the year, so for the presentation that was done in January plus the amount we're talking about this evening for the entire fiscal year, $166,411 was spent, and based on our projected budgeted expenditures for the fiscal year, that equates to 0.13% of our spending. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Jennifer?
I question on that last information, Jennifer, but I do
Yes, sir.
have one with the continuity of employment. And we move those 33 positions over and put those under ESSER. Was there any stipulations that we had made some mention of a possible bonus for retaining our employees? Would there be any wiggle room in that to use those funds for something like that?
You could not do an across-the-board bonus out of ESSER funding. It has to be on an individual basis, and not everyone can be awarded the same amount. It would result in variations of a bonus amount for employees.
Okay, and my second question tied into bonus. I believe back in July at our board meeting in public participation, an individual brought up concerns about the salaries of our support staff. And in the letter that went out to that individual, coming from the board, stated that, and I'm paraphrasing this, we can look at the email and get the exact wording, but I'm paraphrasing it, basically said, we got, thanks to the generosity or whatever the effect of county council, we were able to give a bonus to our employees. Now, did I miss something and we gave a bonus, or was that letter incorrect? And I know I went to county council meeting, they specifically said that money had to be used for a salary increase.
The money that we received from the county is allotted in the general fund for the step or increase in salaries that we gave to all district employees. The millage increase we projected to be approximately $350,000, and to do that step or a 1% increase for those who were at the top of the scale will cost the district over $600,000. So it's costing us more than the money that the county provided to give that step. It's not a bonus, it was the step that we had discussed.
Right, and I remember those figures and you sharing them with us. But my point being, that letter specifically said bonus. So
That's what it said.
the letter's incorrect then.
I'm not familiar with the letter that went out. I'm not sure what letter.
We'll go back and look at that letter, Dr. Babe. Amy's pulling it, thank you. Yeah, we'll go back and look at it. But to answer your question, there was no bonus. What it should have mentioned was the 1 to 2% increase that many of our staff received as a result of the millage increase of 358. Was it 358?
And of course, Dr. Martin, not leading up to is when that letter went out, there was discussion and there was questions about, well, I didn't get a bonus. And so we definitely need to address it and clarify.
And it was the letter for the public participation, it was in response to?
Yeah.
August 2nd letter.
Yes,
August
that-
what?
Second.
August 2nd.
that was a typo.
A typo?
It looks like there was a typo in that letter. It should have said salary.
But it says bonus.
It should have said salary.
So how would it be a typo, bonus versus salary increase? That's not a typo. Is it? This English teacher? Is that a typo?
Not really.
That's content to me.
It's an error, and if it says bonus, which I didn't know until just now, if I would have known previous, I would have had the authors correct that language. So we just need to go back and look at it and revisit, and it was an error, it's not a typo.
Yes, Dr. Hill.
There was some discussion at some point about giving a bonus to folks who,
There was retention stipend.
a retention stipend. Bonus, retention stipend. What is the status of the retention stipend?
We're still looking at the finances and finalizing. Jennifer, you want to share with them our last conversation about the retention stipend?
Yes, ma'am. We are still evaluating that. We need to close out the year and see what the balance will be at the end of June 30th after we make all the adjustments for the audited financial statements. And then we also have to keep in mind what funding may be reduced this year going forward, and just balancing that to make sure we're not putting the district in a fiscal situation that we do not want to enter into.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or concerns?
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, this concludes the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Martin Knox, and your staff for bringing us up to date on your reports. The agenda now calls for the Board of Trustees to enter into executive session. We want to invite our in-person guests as well as our online viewers to join us again when we return to open session. However, there is not a designated time for how long we will be in executive session. If you're unable to be with us at that time, please have a safe and good week, and thank you for joining us. We will now enter into executive session. Yeah, I'm about to say, is there a motion to enter into executive session? Is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Madam Chair, I move that we enter the executive session for the receipt of legal advice, where the legal advice relates to pending, threatening, or potential claims, discussion of negotiations, incident to proposed contractual arrangements, discussion of negotiations, incident to proposed property contractual matters, discussion of individual student matters, discussion of personnel matters, and discussion of personnel report, employment, appointment, compensation, promotion, demotion, discipline, termination, and or release of an employee.
Is there it is, the motion, receipt, the motion was made to enter into executive session for receipt of legal advice, whether legal advice relates to pending, threatened, or potential claims, discussion of negotiation incidents for proposed contractual arrangements, discussion of negotiation incident to proposed property contractual matters, discussion of individual student matters, discussion of personnel matters, and discussion of personnel report, employment, appointment, compensation, promotion, demotion, discipline, termination, and or release of an employee. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote electronically.
It's unanimous.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously, and
Against Jewel and other responsible companies, and that due to the unique nature of this lawsuit, we retain the following attorneys on a contingency fee basis to represent the district in this litigation: Halligan, Mahoney and Williams, PA, Solomon Law Group, LLC, Frazier, PLC.
is there a second?
Second.
Because of the addictive nature of vaping and the potential for serious health problem and other consequences for our students, and the negative impact on our schools, including having to address the disciplinary and addictive nature issues, I move that we authorize the district to proceed with litigation against Jewel and other responsible companies, and that due to the unique nature of this lawsuit, we retain the following attorneys on a contingency fee basis to represent the district in this litigation. And again, that is Halligan, Mahoney and Williams, PA, Solomon Law Group, LLC, and Frazier, PLC. Is there any discussion? If not, please cast your vote. motion passes unanimously.
Great. Just a second, I messed up. Okay. There we go. Yes, ma'am, it is unanimous.
Okay. It is a unanimous vote. All right, we're now down to personnel report, 8.3. Dr. Martin Knox, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, ma'am. I ask the board to accept the personnel report for August 23rd as presented.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board accepts the superintendent's recommendation and approve the August 23rd personnel report.
A motion has been made and second to accept the superintendent's recommendation for board approval of the August 23rd personnel report. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
I'm sorry, who made the second?
Who made the second?
Dr. Lee.
Dr. Lee. Please cast your votes electronically.
Mine is not coming up.
Mine's not either.
So,
There it is.
there.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, you found it in. I don't see nothing, but.
Motion passed.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, 8.4, individual student matters transfers. Dr. Martin Knox, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, ma'am. I ask the board to approve the report as presented as it relates to student transfer matters.
Is there a motion?
Motion that the board accept the superintendent recommendation to approve the individual student's matter/transfer.
Second.
A motion has been made and second to accept the superintendent's recommendation for board approval of the individual student matters transfers. Is there any discussion? Please cast your votes electronically, please.
Motion passes.
The motion passes. 8.5, Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Plan, FY 2021 through 2022. Trustees, do you have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Plan for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Lee?
Was that Dr. Lee? Okay, Dr. Lee seconded. A motion has been made and second that the board approves the Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Plan FY 2021 through FY 2022. Is there any discussion? Please cast your votes electronically.
That passes.
The motion passes. 8.6, mask in schools. Trustees, do you have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to require masks in schools and implementation of mitigation safety protocols.
Second.
A motion has been made and second to require masks in school and implementation mitigation protocol. Is there any questions or discussion? Please cast your votes. The motion fails. 8.7, second reading of policy ADD face covering.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve second reading of amendments to policy ADD face coverings.
Second.
A motion has been made and second to approve the second reading of policy ADD face covering. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote electronically. Motion.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay. Are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We're now at the close of this meeting. I'd like to thank you for giving us your time this evening. Please practice safety protocols for yourself, those you love, and all those you come in contact with during these difficult times we are facing. Please remember, we are stronger together, and together is our onward way forward. Without no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 10:20 p.m.